You know that conversation that you're dreading? That one thing that is getting in the way of you aligning yourself with your ultimate purpose of healing your mind and your body and your thoughts and your feelings? What if there were proven techniques that I can share with you, incorporating any one will help you and guide you out of that intimidation that you feel? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Hello, friends. My name is Miss Carol. I'm a former career teacher, now here with you, humbly in service, sharing techniques and tips that I've learned over my journey of healing, showing myself radical acceptance so I can cultivate more meaningful connections. That feeling is the worst. It makes you feel powerless. And if you're like me, you have probably replayed it in your mind over and over about how it could go, what it could go like, what responses could be, and it almost drives you a little crazy. You know, this deep-seated fear actually comes from a good place. It comes from our ancestors, our ancestral brain attempting to keep us safe because in every situation, whether it's the people we're around, the environments we find ourselves in, our objective is comfort and keeping us safe. But there's no saber-toothed tiger around the corner. There's no boogeyman coming to get us. So in order for us to move past this, we really have to embody our confidence so that we can handle these conversations when they come up. And when you're on a healing journey, they will come up. So again, there's nothing wrong with the journey that you are on. These are just markers to let you know that you are moving in the right direction. So the first thing that you need to understand, the first technique that you can implement is what psychologists call an automatic negative thought, meaning we have curated our mind and our mental landscape, and to some degree our emotional landscape, on such a negative trajectory that we can't even fathom that things could go any other way. It's about saying things like, this is only going to make things worse. I'm going to rock the boat. I'm going to create a problem that I can't handle. But none of these thoughts need to be true. They are just exaggerated fears. And I ask you, when you have these thoughts, to write them down, give them a name, so that way you can bring them to the surface, bring them into the light, and have an opponent to have this battle with. Because we can't predict the future. We can't predict how someone is going to react to us bringing something into their awareness. Because in all intents and purposes, they're just living their life. And we might honestly blindside them with this conversation that we need to have for our healing. So those fears are something that's natural and a part of the process. So when you're writing them down, ask yourself, do I have a valid point of view? Am I being of service to the highest and the best version of the person who is receiving this message? Am I being of highest and best version of myself trying to communicate this message? What is the worst thing that can happen? Play it out in your mind, write it down, and take as many notes that you need to, so that way, before you have the conversation, your body and your mind are more aligned with the fears that you have built up, these negative pathways in your mind. You've began to move them aside. So that's the first technique. The second technique is our body language. Oh my goodness, this is something I'm so passionate about. Before we communicate anything, our body language speaks first. The way that we hold our hands, our facial expressions, and my personal favorite is our posture. Our ability to hold our shoulders back, raise our chin up, and carry ourselves in such a way that we were given this life on purpose. So it's about shifting our position of loud power into quiet power, because that is the subtlety of our posture. It communicates very deeply, but on a very quiet level. So sit up straight, pull your shoulders back, uncross your arms. When you cross your arms like this, you're communicating that you're attempting to protect yourself. When in actuality, when you have something that is on your heart, that is on your mind, it is the most powerful thing that you can do, one of the most courageous things that you can do, to be open to the vulnerability of having these difficult conversations. So hold your body up. Second, give someone eye contact. Let someone know that you are there. Don't look around, don't look down, look at them. I'm not saying to, remain in locked eye contact with them for the entirety of the conversation. No, because that's kind of weird. But, when you land on a point of true significance, make sure that you land it and look at somebody to let them know how serious this is to you, even if they are unable to understand or grasp the severity. You are deepening your values and the things that you hold dear to you by making eye contact with someone. And the third thing that we can do that's a nonverbal technique is our hands. Again, don't shuffle them around. Don't, put them in your pockets. Find a posture that is comfortable for you. And I would highly recommend practicing this in the mirror. And it might sound silly. It really might sound silly, but we have to get in a experimentation kind of way about going about things, because when we practice something, it becomes natural to us. So when you haven't practiced having difficult conversations, if you're just having them on the seat of your pants, they're going to be very intimidating. But if you practice in the mirror, how are you going to hold your hands? How are you going to stand? How are you going to make eye contact? Where are you going to place the pauses in after certain statements? That way you can go into it again, feeling calm, feeling assertive, and feeling in control. So that was the second technique. The third technique is making sure you're making I statements. You do this and you do that is very accusatory, and it naturally causes somebody to be defensive. But when you go into the conversation saying what I am doing, how I feel, it's like you are putting the armor on yourself. You are saying, I am taking 100% responsibility for my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. And this is how I feel. Nobody wants to feel like they're being attacked, because naturally what's going to happen when you feel like you're attacked, you're going to feel like you have to defend yourself. But when you go into a conversation with more I statements, it opens up the dialogue to be one that is conducive to actual listening and being receptive and mutual exchange. Because again, you might be catching this person off guard. You might be catching them, you don't know what kind of day they're having. You don't know what, they might have an upset stomach. There are a myriad of things that might be happening. So use those I statements. If you're feeling overwhelmed, I highly implore upon taking a pause, making a statement, then taking a pause. Give that person the opportunity to respond to what you're saying, because unfortunately what happens when we get into these challenging conversations, people are not really listening. They're waiting for their turn to speak. But when you give a pause, it allows for the proverbial dust to settle, and it allows you to come back into your center and to give them the opportunity to then go ahead and respond the best way that they know how. So those I statements are very, very important. The fourth technique is to ask questions. And I have said this in other videos. When you are asking questions in the conversation, you are leading with curiosity. You are leading with your objectives. Not closed-ended questions, but open-ended questions that allow the listener to have a depth of a comprehension, and then that way they can respond in such a way that makes them think about things critically. Not yes or no questions. You did this, yes or no. You said this, yes or no. I mean, that doesn't really elevate and deepen a consciousness or deepen the reciprocalness of a conversation that we can have. So, be curious, ask questions. A few great questions to ask are, what about that? What about this idea concerns you? How do you think we should move forward? What would be an ideal outcome that could benefit both of us? These type of questions encourages not only your listener, but you to remain curious and open to what the conversation and what the wisdom and the knowledge that we can gain from this conversation. Because just because we have initiated this uncomfortable or challenging conversation and we have attempted to choreograph it in our minds doesn't mean it's going to go the exact way that we want it to, or to anticipate it. We have to be open to and be curious what these what these questions could actually give us, what more wisdom and knowledge it could give us. So that was the fourth technique: curiosity, ask questions. And the fifth one, rehearse for reality. Again, we have inherited the minds and the bodies of our ancestors from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And their objectives was to keep us safe, was to keep us comfortable. But now that we live in such a state, in such a world of comfort, we get to choose. We have the freedom in this day and age to choose our discomforts and our uncomfortableness. We don't have to place ourselves in uncomfortable situations should we not be open to it. However, it's always best at the beginning of any challenging conversation to clearly communicate your intention, to clearly communicate your goal. It acts as like a signpost. So that way you don't get led by your emotions. The other person tries not to get led by their emotions, and we can stay on a path. And, that's where the rehearsing and the practicing in the mirror comes into play. We rehearse the intention of these difficult conversations. We use our intention as a North Star, so to speak. Think about the things that you wanted to cover. Think about all the ways that the conversation may or may not be going in the way or in the direction that you may not have wanted it to, or have been surprised. Because a lot of people, they really will surprise you with how open and how honest they will be. If they can follow your lead, if they say, okay, this person is choosing to be vulnerable, I will then follow their lead and be vulnerable too. I've had so many people in my life say to me during these difficult conversations, I'm so glad you brought this to my attention. It was such a blind spot for me. And I will be more mindful of going and proceeding forward. I've also had other conversations. I had a boss years ago tell me that he was surprised that I had never been punched in the face. And I don't know what kind of reaction he was expecting out of me when he said this to me. And I kind of went back and forth for a week or so whether or not I was going to bring this to his attention and tell him how uncomfortable it made me. I ultimately decided not to say anything because, again, I weighed out, okay, if I say this to him, is it going to make a difference in this job for me that's ultimately just a means to an end? There's no real, I think I was at that job maybe a summer. So I decided to hold it. So that's another thing. You have to decide, okay, is this worth the effort that I'm going to have to exert in order to get to the other side of this conversation. So these are just a few techniques. And again, you don't have to implement them all. Implementing just one or two or whichever you feel comfortable with is more than enough to get these feelings and these thoughts out of you. We really do need to just let them out, to let them go. You know, I would love to hear in the comments, what situation are you feeling held back by because you are feeling intimidated by a conversation that you need, that you know you need to have, but are a little intimidating to have it? Is it with family? Is it with a friend? Is it with a boss like me? You know, who are these people and what are these conversations? You know, so let's recap these 5 techniques. So challenge your negative pathways, challenge your negative thoughts. Shift your body language. Make sure that you are being aware of your posture, your eye contact, what you're doing with your hands. Use I statements. I feel. I am. Be curious. Curiosity is about asking open-ended questions. And prepare. Anything you want in this life, you are going to have to prepare for it. There is no shortage of abundance, and this world is limitless. However, we are not, and the universe is smart enough to understand not to give us anything that we are quote unquote not prepared to handle, because what's going to happen, it's going to send us running off into the woods and retreating. So it's not about mastering these things overnight. Obviously, these things, these techniques is about being on a course, being on a journey towards self-discovery, self-awareness, self-love. But try it with, you know, a low stakes conversation. Try it with somebody that you've just met for a week or so, or, you know, try it with someone that you trust and see how it goes, and give yourself the latitude to make the mistakes, because nobody is going to be 100% right out of the gate. Again, my name is Miss Carol. I am so proud of the work that you are doing. Thank you for showing up. Be well, my friends, and I'll see you next time.